When Clayton passed, a friend of ours, Carrie Grimm, came over.
Great family.
And she sat down with me and Susie, and she looked at us and she said, I know you may have heard this, may have not. She goes, don't rush the process of grief.
Yes. Wow, we would have never believed this. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple, we're on Google. Go out there and listen to us. So we're excited about it. We're glad you're excited about it too. Lunch break. So glad you tuned in. Thank you for liking us, subscribing. I'm sitting here with Mike Harvey and Scott Winkler.
I don't know if they like us. They might like our channel.
Huh?
They might like our channel. I don't know if they like me.
Well,
they might like you.
me. They like Scott.
They like Scott. They're here for Scott.
This is going to be a big day. This is going to be a big show.
Yeah.
I'm pumped to have Scott back on with us, though. Like,
I'm excited.
Reintegrating and hanging out.
Absolutely,
love you, Scott.
Man.
We're here today because a lot of you know Scott. He's been around. He's been on our show as a guest, a host, and a co-host. And Scott's back today, and we're going to talk about a serious subject. And this is one we're coming up on 3 weeks, Scott, you just told me, about Clayton's passing.
Yeah, it'll be his 1 year anniversary, be July 27th, so 3 weeks away.
Yeah.
And
we're just going to talk about...
That time went fast.
Yes.
We're just going to talk about some things leading up to that, things that Scott has learned that might be helpful out there to you, because one of the things I was sharing with Scott is that fentanyl is on the rise.
Yes.
As far as the usage, the availability, and
our inability to stop it.
Yeah.
Lots of stuff.
Or even other countries' unwillingness to
work with us.
Yes.
In this country.
Well, I think that's part of it too.
Oh, a huge
unwillingness
part.
to stop it. It's an inability, but it's they really don't have a big desire to.
It's a money grab, for the other countries. Yeah, we'll get into that as well.
Yeah. So we're here and we're just going to talk about so if you're out there and you want to record this or share it with somebody, because I do believe that some type of addiction affects every family.
It does. And honestly, that you said that, I tune in as much as I can to this show. And I'll tell everybody out there, this, I believe, is going to be a great message. Take your time, record this, make sure you tune in.
Take notes.
The three of us are old buddies, but man, I think we're going to light it up today. I have a really good idea.
Yeah, as a lot of people know my story, and I think I'm not unusual for the populace, is that I got caught up in anabolic steroids and PEDs. And a lot of people say, well, they aren't addicting. And I go, well, try living in someone's body who has got used to it. Mm-hmm. Isn't that addiction?
Yeah.
It's taking something.
There's a physical impact, right?
And as I walked through it, you couldn't have got me with alcohol, or you couldn't have got me with anything. But when it came to the way my physique looked,
see, I think, isn't that almost the bigger addiction?
Well, it one leads to the next.
Yeah, the body dysmorphia or whatever you want to say.
Yeah, because you do get this body dysmorphia.
Absolutely.
And as you're looking in the mirror, you're seeing the results, which are positive, and it's a stimulus.
Right.
Mm-hmm. We all know caffeine is,
is
an addictive
We've
substance.
had many conversations about that recently.
You raise a good point. Looking at this, there's also, I've read about lots of bodybuilders who do the exact same work that you did, that can look at their body, and because of whatever the way their information is transferred, all they see is the bad.
Yes.
They don't see the ripped abs and all this. Although we see it, what they see is, my delt is smaller than this side or this side, and that's that feeds that.
And they're the only ones that notice that.
Oh, sure.
Or maybe other bodybuilders.
Bodybuilding just lost a young 30-year-old.
I saw that as well.
A German.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting as people have comments and they want to go back and blame PEDs. I think you can do that, and if it makes people feel better,
right?
That is something you can do. But I think as you even take it a step further, it's sometimes this inward desire to be better, to feel better, to function better. That's the drive behind it, and it makes it where you can rationalize it.
Yeah.
I need to take this, and I need to be able to achieve this. I mean, there again, a lot of us can't get going without caffeine, right?
But what you said is actually really important to the idea and concept of addiction or sobriety. When you're addicted, whether it's something that's good for your body or you're doing some type of controlled substance that's illegal, you still wake up with that same rationalization every single day. You still can sit there and say, well, I'm going to do it today because it's going to give me enough energy to get out applications for jobs, and then tomorrow I'll start cleaning up. But you come up with that excuse every single day. You know what? It's Monday. But the only reason I'm going to drink tonight is because tomorrow's the 4th and it's a national holiday. And then, you know what? Clearly after tomorrow I'm good. Addicts and those fighting with their sobriety are those that have some type of mental issue with steroids or whatever it be. That's the fight they're constantly battling every day. That's what makes it difficult to get through.
You know, and Steve and I talked about Ozempic on, I think it's Ozempic.
Yes,
it's
the semi-gluten.
It's the one that people use for
weight loss.
Well, actually, it's for
diabetes.
diabetes.
Yeah, they found.
But a nice side effect is it helps people lose weight.
Right.
But it's not the answer. I mean, it's something people will go to. So as I've heard from a few physician friends and people in a pharmaceutical basis, you know, the need for it is being raised, so the price is going up for the true need. You know, so you see when people, you know, supply and demand. Right. You know,
capitalism at its best, right there. Right.
So I have a question to ask for both of you, and I'm sure there's probably a scientific answer to this, and I'm not expecting a scientific answer, though one of you or both of you may have it.
Scott,
are there some people that are more predisposed to that addiction than others? Because I've messed around, and you know, I'm not going to go on air and say all those stuff, but I've done some stupid stuff in my lifetime, right? But I've done stuff that is addicting. The only thing I've ever found myself addicted to is caffeine, but
well, listen, and I'll do that qualifying statement. I'm not a doctor,
right?
But yes, I think there is a predisposition to addiction, and I think because many times it runs genetically in families over and over and over. I think there is a predisposed gene that sets people off where if they use the same thing you do, it's going to affect them differently. And listen, I'm doing my best of the last couple of years to learn about this, and it's really interesting because it doesn't make that person or that woman or man any different, doesn't make him any weaker. In fact, you know, I've read these books where some of the great art, some of the great writings, all these things that we would, you know, characterize or register as brilliance come from people with strong addiction issues. It's the overcoming addiction that ends up being the hardest thing to do.
It comes up. I think it comes up to the point where you push yourself, and the pain seems to be worse than what you think the cure is.
Well, you know what? There's a saying, and I don't want to butcher this, but I think with anybody that's an active addiction, you know, when the pain of using that drug is greater, or when the pain of getting clean is greater than the pain of using, right, or staying addicted, then you will seek help. You know, because every addict is in pain. Every addict, regardless, I don't care who you are, whether they're denying it or not, there is a deep pain, and I think part of the cure in the process of getting better is figuring out that pain, opening yourself up. You know,
Scott, I want to start at that place, and then maybe move forward. I remember you texting me and saying, "Hey, pray because Clayton's in the hospital."
Yeah,
passed out at work today.
Yes.
And I remember it was like we don't know what happened, and then that happened 2 more times in the hospital, correct?
Yes, before ultimately his passing. Yes.
And they found out that he brought it into
the hospital.
You know, so I mean, I remember that was my first awareness of the struggle that your son was going through.
Yes.
Because if you meet Clayton on the street, what mountain could he not climb?
Yes. Yeah.
What?
Well, I had no idea, and I knew Clayton.
You know, and let me lay the context. You're 100% right. That was around Mother's Day of last year.
Yes.
Clayton, who had struggled with addiction, had been doing so good in a live-in rehabilitation place, a location called Third Tradition. They were so good to him. Mark Smith, if you're out there, we love you.
Good job.
Clayton was doing so good, and he was such a brilliant, good-looking kid.
He was.
He was repairing his life. He went in and he got a job at the heart hospital. Then he got a job at KGT, where he was literally thriving. But because of that monster that addiction is, he, after 11 months, he fell off the wagon in November, May, which is around the date you were talking about. And then he came out, he got right back in, he started fighting again, making life as much as he could. And ultimately, he faced his death on July 27th. So whatever, 2 months later. And the reason, I love talking about Clay when ultimately the message is going to be how God has got us through this and what it's done to me. And that's really, from a standpoint of lunch break, his death in the last 12 months, his post-death has turned out to be one of the most spiritual experiences I've ever faced in my life.
So as you say that and you talk to the audience as they're out there, explain what that means to you, because I know that's what you're talking about. For you, it's been the most spiritual journey.
You know what? Yeah, no, I understand.
Your life.
You know what? Both of you are great fathers. And it's as hard for me as it would be you to sit here today and say, my child's been gone a year.
Yeah.
Much less if both of you could go back with me for a year and go through the experience of a death of a child. So I think that part is so difficult to describe, because everybody that has feelings and emotions understands probably, or at least, man, that would freak me out. That's where I was. On July 27th, after his passing, I remember going home, and I was so afraid to lose it. I was so afraid to break down emotionally, because I thought I was going to lose my mind. I literally thought, once I start crying, I'm going to lose it, and I'm going to end up in a rubber room. That to be honest with you, was one of the primary beliefs in my head. And when we finally got back home after that initial experience, people are starting to come over, and I went to my back room and literally fell down praying. And I don't know, Tom, if it was from you or messages I've heard from Pastor Tom or Pastor Ron or other pastors, I literally started giving praise, like in sadness. I started giving praise. God, thank you so much for giving me this child. And then just, selfishly, please get me through this. Please get me through this moment. What took place in my life from the moment I started praying for the next 4 weeks, because, burying somebody's a process.
Oh, it is.
It's from death until burial until right the post. And can I tell you, I have never in my life been lifted up. God has never, can I tell you what? This sounds crazy. I fell in love with God more than I ever have during that time, because I realized how much he loved me.
And how faithful he was to you in a time where it was grieving, and it may not be that time of your life where you've accomplished something or been successful.
Yes. No, you know what's funny? Just saying, I don't know if I've ever truly had that love affair with God of I'm going to just give you everything and just take over. I know that you and I have talked about this. Everybody struggles with the hot and cold and the warm. Mm-hmm. Man, I was at my wit's end when I remember just completely surrendering. What took place that next month, and what has taken place in my life, the preceding 10 months, has been miraculous. It has been so wild. It's not to say I don't have hard days or bad times. Dreams can be the devil at times, man. I can have tough dreams on nights, and I'll wake up and Susie knows what's going on. I have my moments, but God picked me up in such a dire moment in my life. I feel so much more confident today going to him. Everything, God, I'm having a rough go today. I wasn't that. I know you're good at that. I was never as good at that. And I become so reliant on my conversations with God.
It's when you go to God in the dark times, it makes it a whole different experience. You go to him in a celebrating time.
Yes. Yes.
Because it's a different receiving, isn't it?
Oh, it is totally.
I always love that poem, "The Footprints in the Sand." That when the guy looks around, and he said, "This part of my life God, there's two sets of footprints, but when in the hard times of my life, there was only one set, and then it went back to two.
Right.
Where were you? He says, I was carrying you.
You know what's, I agree, Tom. And what's so amazing is when we're in a great state of joy, and even during those times where we give thanks to God, like God thanks, sometimes it's hard when you're in this great place in your head to separate, okay, I'm this happy for what's going on, plus I'm this happy because God's got me. But when you're in a dark place, in a really dark place, and you're praying for God to come in, it is so noticeable when he comes in and picks you up. Their air's different. The mood changes. It's a very bizarre, surreal thing.
So from the outside, because I know that when I got that one text and it broke my heart, you said that Clayton had passed.
Yeah.
And that you were going to, just kind of focus in.
Yeah.
I was able to attend the kind of like the candlelight vigil.
Right.
That was at the Riverwalk. That was pretty sensational. Mike and I went, and as I saw the people and everyone come up and speak about your son and how dynamically he affected them and how infectious his smile was, I remember at the end you got up. And I told Mike, I go, something's about ready to happen, something special. Who I forgot there was a couple of people standing next to us, and as you did it, I hadn't heard anybody eulogize, and it wasn't even the place for it, but you did it, and then you turned it and you expressed, and you said something like, "If you really want to know how Susie and I have made it, I'm going to tell you," and it was all the Lord.
Yeah.
And you took it from that place. And then it was pretty interesting, and as we're throwing out some Christianese here, I thought for sure you were doing altar call.
You know what's funny? You told me that afterwards. That was, I was telling Pastor Ron, or I think you had told Pastor Ron the story.
Yeah.
And he'd come to me and asked me about it, and I said, it was such a surreal experience. And he's looking at me like, yeah, this is what I do for a living. I don't know what's going on. So I started telling him about it, and he's like, "Isn't that a powerful feeling?" What's ironic is it's July 27th in Bakersfield, and it's hot.
Hot.
And let me back up. That was around a week after we had the vigil. So for five days or so, all of my friends, family, all of my church family is praying. I'm just guessing is praying for me. I'm feeling lifted up by God. In as much grief as I was going through, I still feel God's arms around me. And my mom, if I'm not mistaken, looked at me because we had tried to give everyone a chance to speak, which that was a special time because Clayton had such an amazing wide range of friends.
Oh, he did.
He had friends that were from the rehab home, and he had some friends from business, and all of them were stepping forth and telling the one same consistent story. Clayton loved. That was the one consistent. Well, it was getting really hot, and it had been like 2 hours, and my mom looked at me like, "Hey, maybe you should get up and say thank you." And that's all I was going to do. So I'm like, "Hey, guys."
All you thought you were going to do.
And I got up and I said, "Hey, guys." I remember saying, "I want to thank everyone for coming. I know it's a hot evening." And then God just set me on fire and wanted to, and I just started talking about how much we appreciated at the time being loved by everyone. Everyone in the world that we talked to was saying, "Hey, man, we love you. You're going to get through this. We love you." And I remember saying, that was the message God was giving me at the time was, Scott, you're loved. It's so much easier knowing when you have an army of love behind you. And that's one of the biggest things I've learned this past year is I don't think I ever loved enough in life. Or maybe I didn't enjoy it or appreciate it. Man, that is one of the heaviest things I've gone through. And that along with sharing this entire thing with Clayton's mom. We're divorced. We've been divorced for a long time. And that, man, I'm telling you, she's a great mom. She loved Clay with all her heart. But going through a funeral as a blended family, it's hard when they're alive. But you know what? That was another very heavy thing. God brought us all together. We were able to all grieve. Her and her husband grieve in my house for a week after, and that was such a God miracle.
Nothing else mattered, did it, Scott,
no,
at that moment?
That was just it. Nothing mattered. And everybody during these hard times feels so free to say, "Hey, man, I love you.
Yeah,
I love you." And that's what God put on my heart that night. And that was just like the first series of things going, And after that, I read a book during this time talking about the importance of praising God. And the next 3 months, all I did was give God praise. I did, even on bad days,
It goes to the fact if you can praise Him on the bad days,
Yes.
those good days are going to be a lot sweeter.
Yes.
There's a book written by God, his last name's Crothers.
Merlin Carruthers.
Yes.
Yes.
Power and Praise.
Power and Praise. I have not read it, and I don't want to act like I know more. Nicole Dickey mentioned it yesterday in her message,
Yes.
and I wrote it down and ordered the book yesterday.
Yeah.
But I ordered a different book from the guy that did Jesus, not Greg Laurie,
Yes.
but he did one on praise.
Yes.
That was the book I read.
It takes things in a different spin, doesn't it?
Yes.
I remember when I was going through my heart issue and I had anxiety and depression. I was doing everything right, but I couldn't shake this anxiety and depression.
Right.
So I started praising God for my heart problem, which has led to anxiety and led to depression.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's amazing how thanking God for circumstances that aren't welcomed into your life. You didn't say, hey, come and join me.
Right.
But I don't see anything in James chapter 1 where the Bible says, consider it joy when various trials come upon you.
Right.
That is, when the trial comes upon you, you're an attorney.
Right.
Trials are like,
Right.
they're there to get to the bottom of the truth,
Right.
right? And I think trials come into our life to get to the bottom of something. And at the end of the trial, you can go, okay, I get it now.
Right.
And as you're there isn't any other manner to take but saying, Lord, thank you for this because I'm going to learn something.
Oh,
for it.
yes. And I'm looking forward to talking a lot about that when we talk about the ministry.
Yeah.
of it.
Well, we're going to talk about Scott's going to be on Ministry Matters
Right.
because, and Mike and I talk about this a lot. What is the Ministry Matters shows? The Ministry Matters shows is wherever your voice is loudest.
Right.
There's a ministry there.
Right.
And your voice has become very loud in an area that is being neglected, and that's the area of, legislation or legalization or the law being applied
Right.
to the fentanyl.
Yeah, lots. Yeah, we can get it. Yeah,
Yeah, we'll
drug
get
addiction and
into
how we
it.
help those. Yes.
So you're out there, Scott, and as you've been making through, what would you? Because there's a lot of people now. I know this because of the ministry. I've been in the ministry 29 years, and I know it because it's my profession. But how would you tell somebody out there? Because a lot of people are lost in what do I do? I've got somebody who is grieving. I've got a family member. I don't know what to do, and I always give them the advice. Well, you don't have to do anything.
Right.
Sometimes it's your presence.
Right.
Sometimes just saying, I'm there.
Right.
I remember when your father was passing away, which happened 1.5 years before
Yes,
Clayton's,
yes.
I think, something like that. I remember when I went over there, I came home, Tiffany goes, what'd you do? I go, I was just there.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you're out there, thinking, oh, what do I do? I don't know what to say. I'm not a pastor or a preacher. You don't have to worry about that stuff.
Yes.
Well, would you give it to us on your side, what you saw? People, were they hesitant to approach you?
Oh, yes. One of the other special times right after his passing, is Clayton had this great big group of friends from high school, and they came over for the next several days and just showered us with love. What we did is we ended up sitting into our front room. There must have been 30 or 40 or 50 of us, and we would tell Clayton stories. And
I think you could still tell 100 Clayton stories.
And the thing is I know so many,
Yeah.
but to have all of his friends there
Yeah.
at once that were telling ones I've never heard, what's crazy is death makes us all feel uncomfortable. It just does. But I will tell you, from a survivor, nothing makes me happier than talking about Clay. I know and listen, my family can be dark, funny dark. So we joke with it. Like if someone comes in and says, oh, we're all the kids, Conrad has no problem telling people, well, my brother's dead. We've had to open up so it doesn't feel awkward. It doesn't feel bad. Clayton is a huge part of our life. We love talking about him. And you know what? I know my kids. I think the hardest part for me, right now, a year later, is I know my children are all in different phases of their grief. Clayton has 2 sisters and 2 brothers, and they all loved him dearly, but in their own special sibling way. And the girls go through theirs a lot different than the boys. Boys hammer things up. They clamp down.
Yeah.
And my kids, especially my oldest, when he wants to talk about it, he wants to talk about it only in ways where he can get a laugh. My other one doesn't talk at all, because I think he doesn't like others feeling awkward or uncomfortable. And the girls I probably talk to the most about it, because they're more open and they remember all these stories. That's a hard part. That's still a part that I'm kind of trying to figure out and, kind of caravan through.
Do you think you'll ever get to a point where that won't be a struggle?
Yeah, you know what? As a believer, I'm going to think I will. And when I say it won't be a struggle, I'm sure I'm going to have to go over all these hills of struggle to figure it out. I think at some point I'm going to end up having a heavy son conversation with Conrad, or one with Calvin, so we can say, hey, man, it hurt all of us. Because I don't think I've had that, and I'm just being totally honest, I don't think I've had that breakdown, hey, guys, this hurt all of us. And part of it is because I've been so worried about them.
Yes.
And so, like I said, as much as I've learned, man, death is a process, and I'm still navigating through a lot of it.
So if somebody is out there listening to you and they're in the same spot, what advice would you give them?
I would say the same thing. A wonderful dear friend of mine, when Clayton passed, a friend of ours, Carrie Grimm, came over.
Great family.
And she sat down with me and Susie, and she looked at us and she said, I know you may have heard this, may have not. She goes, don't rush the process of grief.
Yes.
She said, and when she said that, I took it in, and she was speaking from this position of just having great knowledge, having lost her husband.
She lost her husband.
And a young man, a great guy.
Successful, great man.
Yeah.
I all I ever heard about the Grimm brothers were
and
phenomenal stories.
Carrie's like, it's going to be a process. But she was also telling me, not just as a spouse, but as a mother, because she had to watch her kids go through it. And she's like, let it come. Let it come to you, and don't feel like you have to rush through it. And that was great advice, because when I went to this is what really helped me too, and I went to a counselor afterwards, to make sure I wasn't losing my marbles. And there's 5 stages they talk about of grief. And see, for me, I this is just my goofy attorney brain. I'm like, okay, I must be in denial phase. Okay, now I'm moving to acceptance phase. And having
you wanted a process that made sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to him and him saying, hey, man, listen, there are 5 stages, but they're always going. You're going to go through
and they're tangled too,
yes,
aren't they?
they're interwoven, and you're going to go through periods where you understand it. You're going to go through periods where you're angry and mad. But you just don't go through each one over a month or 2. Yeah, and that's what I was. And
like,
I know it
Judge,
sounds,
can I have a deferment?
Yes, yes.
No.
But it may, at the time, as crazy as that sounds, I needed to hear that, because I would have bad days in the beginning. I'd have really bad days. And then I'd wake up with these great days, and I would always overanalyze myself, like, I'm losing my stuff because I should have been happy because I'm getting past. And I remember
Oh yeah, you're almost like, because I've talked to a lot of people who says, I thought I was past that.
Yes.
And you don't get past that.
Yes, because moments would come where you felt past it, and then you would go, you would digress,
And there again, I know, you know what I felt, Scott, and you lost your father, who was an amazing man, Jerry Winkler, and your mother, Carol. We lost him during the pandemic.
Yeah, right out June of 2020.
I mean, bam, right there. Yeah. So then we went into the pandemic, which isolated all of us.
Yes, closed us down.
And as you were going through it, there's things with dads and sons, and I know you just had it with your dad being the son. Right. Then you had it as being the dad with the son, and I know how it is for me and my dad, and I love it that my dad and I had a really kindred heart towards the end of his life. Mm-hmm. And I got to lead him to the Lord, and we had 3 years to kind of celebrate that, which doesn't sound like a long time, but it was a great time.
Gave you some peace.
I remember when my daughter had an accident and she had to have some skull surgery. I walked into the hospital, and my wife goes, "What are you gonna do?" I go, "I'm gonna call my dad." Of course, she gave me the look that he's no longer here.
Yeah.
And I go, I know that.
Yeah.
But my initial experience was I wanted to go there.
Yes.
Do you ever have those moments?
Oh man, one of the pieces of peace I get is, and my family talks about all the time, Clayton is with Pop, celebrating now, and that gives us some peace. But the hardest parts, the times where I do struggle with both my dad, this was a classic time. I wish he would have been there, and then with my son, I'll see movies. That was
Oh,
our thing is movies.
and movie lines.
Yes, and so things will happen. And can I tell you, his friends and my other kids, my sons and their friends, have been so good to me. They send me movie lines. I'll get a text a week saying, "Hey,"
I have to bring a smile to your face.
You know what? I've been loved. I have been loved and looked after the last year. And my wife, I got to mention her too. But yeah.
Well, what I've seen is, I've seen you and Susie grow in what we call kind of a marital bonds, or the Bible
Absolutely.
describes it as one flesh.
Yes.
Over the last probably 3 years.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, and there is a joy on her face.
Oh, hey, Susie's my homegirl.
Yeah, she is.
No doubt.
Ride or die, right?
That's right. That's right. I love her to
Ride or
death.
die.
All right.
Scott, would you leave the audience with kind of your final thoughts for our show on, you're not under a time constraint or anything, your personal thoughts, and then a thought that you can convey to them?
You know what? The thought I would have is don't allow or don't let death be that one trident thing in your life where we say, okay, now we're going to get together. Now we're going to come together and be a family. You and I were talking, Tom, right before the show, and it could always be right around the corner. It could always be, I would say, as hard as it is, and as much as we make it almost a cliche, make every moment last, man. Make every moment with our family last, and forgive. If we're holding on to things, whether it's addiction, whether it's financial irresponsibility, or whatever it is from family members, forgive and pray. Forgive and pray. And then the same thing I said a year ago, Proverbs 3:5. You know what? Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding, because I'm telling you guys, if you trust in Him in everything, I promise it's not going to be. I don't know how it says He shall make your path straight. He will make your path straight. You may have some marching to do. You may have some lessons to learn, but you know what? Love, pray, and trust, man. You're going to be okay.
I love
That's
that.
it.
Well, we're going to leave it on that.
Good word.
Yep.
Thank
Thank
Have
you
a
for
great day.
watching.
Hi, guys.
God bless.
Catch Ministry Matters.